to explore ideas that shape the future of business, leadership, and society. Today, I'm really excited because we have Father Casey here, and he is a Franciscan friar and author of several books, including Let Go, the seven blocks to Christian discipleship, which I have read, and actually it's a great book, and I think has a lot of business principles in it, which we'll talk about. He also has a really popular YouTube channel called Breaking in the Habit, where he really takes things in our culture and ties them to faith and ancient wisdoms and principles, I would say. So I'm really excited to have him talk about what we as leaders in industry and in business can learn and apply to get the most out of our most important asset in business, which is our people and our team and the clients and customers we connect with. So thanks so much for joining us, Father Casey.
Absolutely. Thank you.
So I have to ask, this might be the most important question. Can I say I'm getting business advice from a monk, or is a friar and a monk a different thing?
Yes, friars and monks are different things.
Okay.
Monks take a vow of stability, so you will find them in monasteries where their work is labor and their prayer. So those are the things they do. They live a very stable lifestyle. They often don't leave the monastery. Whereas
Okay.
friars are a type of mendicant, which means we go out and we beg, we preach, and we live in the world. We come back for prayer, but we're ultimately in the world.
Okay, that's a really important distinction. Wow, I'm glad I didn't realize that.
Yep.
Uh, all right, so have owned several businesses and have used Catholic principles in those businesses. And maybe we can talk about what I mean by that, because that might sound weird to people, maybe even my own team members
Mhm.
listening to this, and who aren't Catholic, because I don't believe any of them are, that don't even realize that's the case. But your book, Let Go, had a lot of, I think, useful principles. So I'll just ask, as a business owner or leader listening to this, what should I let go to be truly successful?
Oof, I mean, so many things. And I would say, as a Catholic, I would say let go of the bottom line as the only source of success. Obviously, we need to care about the bottom line. Obviously, we got to care about the expenses and the revenues, and you're not going to stay in business. But that is not the only means of success. In fact, I don't even think it's the primary one. People have to be the sign of success, and particularly the common good. Are we doing something that makes the world around us better and more profitable for humans, or are we using humans to make us more profitable? And it's something we can draw straight from Jesus for when he talks about the Sabbath. The Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. And I think sometimes we get confused when we see people as simply customers or simply obstacles to overcome, when we start seeing our labor force as simply a line item rather than human beings with feelings and needs and opportunities.
Yeah, I think that makes so much sense in the younger demographics of people, that are Gen Z or millennials even. There's a lot of research that shows that they take positions and they work for companies that have values and have a purpose
Mm,
beyond just the pay. And just as an example, let's say a practical application, our core value at my marketing agency, Optimized Marketing, is love. And I hope every
mm.
business owner listening to this steals that value,
Yeah,
because when I first introduced that to everyone we hire and recruit, why is it love? It's not a romantic thing, but it's the classical definition, which is to will the
mm,
good of another. And if
sure.
I want to be successful, I have to have somebody else's, will their good, whether that's clients and customers and so on. So do you have any other practical examples of something that, hey, if I'm sitting here thinking, okay, what does this mean? What can I do in my business today or this week?
Yeah, obviously, I don't come at from a business side, but I do love businesses that are run well and things that identify as kind of Catholic principles. And one thing that comes to mind is the fact that people are often not motivated by money. I know that sounds crazy because we always think about money, but if you give people a raise, that does not mean they're going to give you more work. But if you give them a sense of ownership, and that can be a literal sense of ownership or simply a sense of power or autonomy to do what they feel best, you're going to get so much more out of them. And so I think including people in conversations, having a little more collegiality rather than simply, I'm the boss, I tell you what to do, fill in your reports. I think you're going to get a lot more out of them because it's going to feel like you're flourishing rather than just doing a job.
Yeah, no, those are great points. Actually, I think right there you can see the book Drive by Dan Pink. He talks about three things
Hmm.
people need: autonomy, mastery, and purpose.
There you go. Yeah.
Which when I read the book, I was like, man, this is like almost Thomas Aquinas, talking about Catholic theology. But if you understand the human person, these things are important. So, I mean, you just nailed that one
Yeah.
exactly what I think is
And I
really
think there's
applicable.
business examples of it where you say, well, turnover costs money. So why would I want my employees to be unhappy? Why would I want them to leave? Invest in them now, and you're going to get much more of them there. I mean, even if you're looking only at the bottom line, it makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you could put a gigantic billboard in somewhere like say Silicon Valley, right, where there's all these business owners and billions of dollars and so on, people that are literally influencing the world with the things that they're doing, what would it say and why?
Besides Jesus loves you, I don't know. That might be a little obvious, but for business owners, I think the people are your product. Maybe I'd have to think more for the catchiness of it. But it's not about selling things, and it's not about controlling people or just simply getting people to buy stuff. The people are the product, and we want to make sure that our neighbor has what they need. And so you can look at this from a business standpoint that we want our customers to be able to purchase the things that we have. So we want to make sure that they have a good life and they are happy and they're healthy and they have economic opportunities. I think so often we think simply in competitive terms that I need to beat my neighbor, I need to beat the other company. But cooperative terms work much better, I think, for everyone in the long run. If we can say, I need to help my neighbor so that ultimately they can buy my product or ultimately they can help me, I think we're all better off.
And so I was kind of thinking you would say what you just said, that Jesus loves you first, and I almost put that
Yeah.
into my question, like except for that. So yeah, I
Yeah.
appreciate you going a little deeper on that. So if you could give some advice to a smart, driven college student about to enter the workforce, about what success looks like, what advice they should
Mm.
ignore, what advice they should follow, what would that look like?
I think to be well rounded. I think we're in a sort of specialized culture right now where you have to pour yourself into all one thing. You got to be really, really good at one thing. And I understand that because otherwise you're not going to get noticed unless you have a niche, unless you have a specialty. At the same time, I think it helps us live in silos a little too much. And we forget that we can learn from other people, that uh, being a business person doesn't mean that you have to be ignorant about science or religion or culture. And I think having a little bit more of everything makes us better at what we do, even if we're not going to change our political beliefs or change our religious beliefs or go be a part of another culture. It's not really the point. The point is just to be a little more well rounded and open to everything that's out there in the human experience.
Yeah, one of the ideas that I took from your book on Let Go, that is really hard, particularly if you're in a business, you're successful, you're getting promotions, you have the titles, things that you talked about being difficulties, um, is to take care of your responsibilities, your family, and so on, but also have humility. When you talked about being
Mm,
well-rounded and learning, to me, that's the ultimate humility to say, okay, there's something I can learn from everyone, right? And so how would you balance
for
that
sure.
out, that humility with the caring for your family, caring for your business, making sure the business is running well, and so on?
Humility for me has got to be the epitome of it all. As a Franciscan, so that's why I'm dressed in brown here. I'm a follower of St. Francis of Assisi, who followed Jesus of Nazareth. And Francis's major idea was that I am a servant. I am the lowest of the low. I don't want anyone to feel uncomfortable around me because I have nothing. Everything was given to me by God and everything is a gift, so I don't claim to have anything. And he does this in the humility of Jesus. And I think if you ground yourself in that, where you recognize everything is gift, well, then I don't deserve anything. And even though I've worked hard, it's because other people have worked hard before me. They've given me opportunities and I've taken advantage of them. When you can do that, then you can have two things happen. One, a happier view on life because everything is gift rather than things I deserve. But also, I think a sense of drive, honestly, because I think when we realize or we see that I'm the one who makes everything happen, then we can rest on our laurels and we can think I've done everything and that's mine to do and I'm just going to quit. But if we realize that, well, actually, I've done very little. So much as around me has been done for me. Maybe we can have a little bit more drive to say, well, I should probably do a little bit more for myself, for others, for the community around me.
Yeah, I think that is something that is hard for a lot of successful business leaders is to step back and appreciate they worked hard, they got their
Mhm.
degrees, they put in the hours, they did all of these things, but to realize all the people that are necessary. And from a practical business perspective, I would add, maybe one more nuance to that. When you see it in that way and you empower other people, as you were saying earlier, your business will flourish and become more successful. And so by having that humility, other people appreciate that. They want to work with you. They want to also make you successful. And I've personally experienced then giving them that power and having them see, like, I don't need to take credit. I'm actually most happy as a business leader when somebody does something better than me. Right? Because
Yeah.
then I don't have to do it, because then, we've transferred that on. And so that just kind of triggered in my mind as you were talking about the humility. There are practical, even bottom line benefits to approaching and having that mindset beyond the fact that it's less stressful.
Yeah, and it comes
Right?
back to this idea of competition. And if we see everyone as our opponent, then everyone is going to be someone we've got to cut down for us to succeed. But if we can see that there's enough for everyone to go around, and my brother's success is actually my success, well, think about not only the work environment, how much better that's going to be, but how much less stressed we're going to be, and how
Mhm.
much more successful when we can say, I'm happy that someone came up with that idea, and I can support them.
Yeah, and I think that's a real struggle in corporate America that I don't have an answer for, but it
Mm,
seems to be a struggle from what I've seen. So let's change the subject a little bit. One of the things that's on everybody's mind in the business world is artificial intelligence and what's happening there and how to
sure.
use it and how many jobs it can replace, and all of these types of things. And so one of the things that I share with people to kind of explain the power of AI in really simple terms is, if it involves human language, AI will probably be better at it. Kind of like if it involves math, the computer system at some level is calculating and doing, I'm a mechanical engineer, so CAD and so on, is better than it already. And so most people are like, what do you mean human language? Like talking and voice and I mean, all of it. So in a world where that's the case, and AI is going to surpass humans in language, the thing we thought was unique about us compared to all other species, what is our unique purpose? What is humanity's purpose? How do we still get value in that world?
Yeah, well, I wouldn't say that language is our unique purpose. Certainly, it is something we're very good at. Other species have ways to communicate. We're certainly advanced in that. But I think there's an ability to reason, an ability to love with sacrifice that makes us quite different than anything else. And I don't see a computer doing either of those things anytime soon. Certainly, pure computation, we've been far surpassed for many years. Language, yes, it's there, but I do think, and one of the worries I have, and I'll get to some things that I like about AI, but one of the worries I have is sort of the so-called dead internet theory, which is just that AI is going to take what is already out there, and it's going to take the best of it, and it's going to put it in the best way, but it's not going to come up with necessarily anything new. And so it will maybe predict what the next thing will be potentially, and it could get something new. And please, obviously, this is a very rudimentary understanding. So correct and nuance as you need. But I think there's something to the lived human experience that is something AI can only regurgitate, but it can't understand suffering, and it can't understand love, and it can't feel in a way that we can. Will it be able to search better than we can? Of course. It can compute better than we can. It can connect things from databases all across the world. But there's something about that creativity that I fear we may rely too much on. And I think studies have already shown that just talking with one another versus doing the AI and then talking with one another, there's a big difference. People become less creative, they become less adept, we become dumber. So the computers might become smarter, but as a result, we become less able.
Now, that's an excellent point. I didn't talk about that much. Actually, we didn't address that particular one in our book, Soulless Intelligence, which is, as people start using AI, they actually get worse at their job.
Yeah.
But the output tends to get better, which is an
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
interesting, situation, right? Where what if you just look at the work, it's better, but the person is losing skills and not able to continue to grow, and that is a real
Yeah.
concern. And how do you
There's
address that?
already evidence that people are not able to adjust to difficulties. The autopilot being an example. When you're on autopilot, literally as an airplane, for 99% of the time, and there's one thing that the computer can't figure out, well, now the human doesn't know how to figure out either because you haven't had that flight time to figure out those difficulties. So that is a little bit of a worry that we become too reliant on it. I think we'll adapt. I think as every new innovation comes, we will find ways around it. But as it is first introduced, we're struggling a little bit. I can
So
tell you my students are in school. They're having their papers written by AI and they don't know how to critically think themselves.
Yeah, that's a really good insight. One of the things that we'll talk to people about when we discuss the use of AI is that AI is not finding the best. It's finding,
Mhm.
and this is rudimentary, essentially the average, right? If
Yeah.
something's repeated many, many times, the AI is going to choose that over something that's brilliant but only said once, because
Hmm.
it's a statistical prediction mechanism. And so if I'm let's say a writer, right? So I'm doing an email marketing or something like that, or I could be a lawyer, anything that involves word, and I'm a 2 on a scale of 1 to 10, AI is going to instantly make me better because it's going to do like a 5 or a 6. But if I'm
Hmm.
actually an 8 and I like write the most beautiful email or book or whatever, AI is only going to make it worse
Sure.
unless I know how to tweak it and say, wait a sec, that's a little not as good, and so on. I think there's this learning curve that we're missing out on. You're talking about college students who are early, so they're ones or twos in their knowledge of whatever the topic is,
Hmm.
and they get it, the AI, and they're like, oh wow, this is great. But they never progress to that further point. I think that
Sure.
is a risk in business. And I'm curious, how would
For
you
me,
help
yeah.
people, beat
Well,
that?
I think understanding how to use it with anything is
Mhm.
really helpful. Just like the early stages of the internet, where you said you can't believe everything you read. The moon is made out of blue cheese. We need to know how to critically discern this. I use AI all the time, actually, as an initial search engine. I think it's a analogously, I think it's a really, really super powered Wikipedia in that I'm never going to cite Wikipedia. I'm never going to quote it. I'm never going to use that as my main source. But if I go to an AI server and I say, hey, I'm looking for a passage in scripture that fits this theme, and can you connect it to something that the patristics wrote 1500 years ago? It's going to spit out enormous amounts of things that I had not thought of, which then I can go look at the primary sources and say what it actually says and say, ah, that's a really good idea. Or now you kind of missed the mark. Let me refine my
Yeah.
search. If I simply copy and paste the output, then I have not thought much and it's probably going to be very bad. But if I use it as a way to uncover things that are mysterious and I didn't know were out there, it's amazing the world we live in. The ability that we have to connect infinite amount of information is incredible.
Yeah. And so, I mean, that's an excellent point and example. My advice to people is you have to become that 8 or 9 or 10 to be able to use AI, and then you'll be extremely powerful. But if you just stay at that lower level of experience and skill, then you wouldn't know, hey, that connection you made to the patristic fathers was wrong. Like it was,
Yeah.
yeah, it wasn't a good one. So that's a great point. So, um, change it up a little bit. How does free will shape our understanding of morality? And do you think AI can ever make moral decisions?
Wow. Yeah, I don't know if I have
Simple
the
question.
most intelligent answer on the spot on that. I think free will is something that I think we first have to understand is not a binary thing. It's not that we're free or not free. We all have gradations of freedom. And what I mean by that is think simply of addictions. People who have addictions are free. They have choice in their life. But they're also weighed down by their disease. They're weighed down by years and years of habit. They have forces working upon them that make that decision really, really difficult. And so they may only be firing at 20%. They still have that, but they're not as culpable, we would say, in moral theology. There's something getting in their way. And so I think with all decisions, we all have freedom, but we also have to uncover those social circumstances, the pressures that are put onto us, the bad habits we've worked into. We are not pure, reasonable people, as sad as that sounds. We wish we were, but we're just not. We're weighed down by sin and bad decisions. As far as I think, as you said, it's going to find the average. It's going to look around for all the answers, and it may find some really good ones. But I don't see it as a particularly moral agent. I see it as a mathematical agent. I see it as a summarizing agent. I see it as a research agent. But to handle the complexities and in fact, I think there's something human about being emotional and even biased that is a good thing. There's something about that that adds to the human experience that the computer will never really know.
I really appreciate you pointing out the non-binary nature of free will,
Mm.
because everyone, I've read tons of books on AI, but everyone that talks about AI will essentially take over, assumes free will is binary. Oh, it can't
Mm.
be true because we see people falling into, alcoholism or whatever else. And it's like,
Yeah,
no, you just misunderstand what free will is. So no, I
yeah.
think that's really
St. Paul
important.
says, "I do what I do not want." He said, "I don't
Yeah.
know why, but like I know what I want, and yet I don't do it." And there's probably no passage in Scripture I identify more with. It's like, man, how do I keep doing this?
Yeah, the tough part is research has shown that AI, when asked moral questions, and so, the research is interesting because obviously somebody had to define what a good moral answer was, but essentially they took moral
Sure.
ethicists and they asked them a bunch of questions and they asked the AI a bunch of questions and they had people evaluate which ones they believe were more accurate, more moral. And the AI almost always won.
Mm,
Definitely was better than the average person answering it, but it was even better than the ethicists. And so when you look
mm,
at studies and research like that, you know, how, you talk a lot about you have to form the conscience properly. So is the
sure.
fact that humans are thinking the AI is more moral, a fact that, because their consciences aren't formed well enough? What do you think's happening there?
Yeah, I don't know what's happening there, but I do think it probably speaks to a lot of underdeveloped human consciences. A lot of people that don't understand what right and wrong is. They don't understand the implications of things, and so in that way, I think a computer is going to be consistently good. Um, and I don't know the studies you're speaking of, and I can't really speak to the implications of that. I think there are a lot of people that allow their lack of freedom or their lack of reasoning or they're filled with bias to get in the way and they can't see everything. And so sometimes maybe having the clarity of a system that has looked at all the best answers can be a really great tool.
Yeah, and potentially even you could use it for, because you can train it to say, hey, I want the
Mm,
Catholic position, or what the
sure.
Christian position, or whatever denomination, or whatever, to understand that particular worldview.
Yeah, because morality is not again a binary thing. There's not moral people and immoral people. There's so many schools of thought and different values that we kind of put in front of each other. So maybe you could train it to say, with this as the highest value, what would be the most opportune position?
Yeah,
It's
no, that's
possible. Yeah.
absolutely right. You could totally do that. I don't know if you're familiar with things like Neuralink. So Elon Musk's company that's like implanting things in people's brains and
Oh,
such.
sure, sure. I've seen
So my
enough Black
question,
Mirror shows to know about the concept.
um, yeah, so you would get, if you've watched Black Mirror, then you would get the kind of concepts. So the question would be, Um, at what point do we replace human parts that the human becomes less human, or vice
Yeah.
versa? They're actually using cells and putting them on computers, right? So I take a computer base and I add human cells to do different things. At what point does that become human?
Yeah. Again, I'm going to preface with I don't know. These are big, big questions, but we can explore them together. Um, I think starting off that technology can be great tools. And just as we have a computer in our pocket, if we can connect it to our brain, I'm not necessarily opposed to that as best it's used. I think to the extent that it maybe takes away our free will or it distracts us from things that are good, even if it is a good thing. If it's a net negative for the common good and for relationships, I might allude to the movie Wall-E, where we're just staring at our screens all day long, or focused on relationships with robots. It may have a better output, but maybe not a better human consequences. In terms of when will something become human, I don't think, just from my perspective, and it ever will be. It may have some human cells to it. It may have some human DNA to it, but life is not something that we have control over. It is a gift, and it is beyond ourselves. We believe that life is from God. It can be biological, maybe, and it can come from. But I guess in the same way, again, another movie reference, Inception, just in the same way you can't create necessarily an idea in someone's brain, they'll always know where it came from. I think that's biological source will always know where it came from, and it won't be a new thing necessarily or a hybrid biological, mechanical, or electronic thing. It will always be those separate things working together. I'm not sure if that in any way answered your question.
I'm giving you the softball questions here, so
Okay. Yeah, exactly.
Uh, but these are the things that we have to wrestle with, and I think part of it is, as a business owner, is there, if I'm replacing employees with AI, which
Mm,
essentially everybody is at some degree, right? If I'm doing any sort of mechanical work, heck, I have cars and trucks. Well, those are replacing people that would have been, plows replaced humans. Like technology
mhm.
always does to some degree. Is there a point where it's, immoral in the sense of, there's so many fewer people working. And
Yeah.
I think a scarier side of it is a former Google exec, he wrote a book called Scary Smart. His name's Mo Gaudat. Basically says we need to, not basically, he actually says we need to talk to Siri and Google Maps as if they were our own children. We have to treat AI like our
Yeah.
children. And so this is not an uncommon concept in the tech world, in the
Yeah.
Silicon Valley world, that these things are essentially going to be the equivalent of us. And that's why,
Yeah. And that's
asking the questions is important. It's important to discuss these things, right?
sure. And I think that's a very sad reality to me. I'll say that directly, and I can speak a little bit more to this. It can be very, very good at what it does, but it's not going to be human. There's not a consciousness in the way that a Christian would understand consciousness. And there's not a life in a way that we believe that God has breathed into it. It may be really, really wicked smart, but that doesn't mean it has necessarily wisdom. It doesn't have an opportunity to have love, to have sacrifice, as I mentioned before. As far as its place in society, though, I think again it goes back to this question of the common good. It may be really, really good at what it does. And in fact, may have some positives that it may eliminate car crashes, which would be great. There's thousands of people that die from that every year. It may make things more efficient. That's wonderful. But if the result is that 5 or 6, or a few more, billionaires are able to control almost everything with very little connection with other people, I think this ultimately makes our society worse, not only because there's going to be no one able to actually buy your products and they're just going to live very, very poor, but I think part of the human experience is work, and that we find our purpose in work. Not our ultimate purpose, but I think work is a good thing, and having ownership of what we do and being able to provide for your family. And so if there's a system out there that makes a few people really, really rich, but everyone else not only poor, but demeaned, I think that's a really big problem. And I struggle with this with cars, because it's somewhat inevitable that in a few years we're going to have a much more ubiquitous self-driving taxis and Waymos and those sorts of things. They already exist, and it will make everyone safer. But I also think that there's going to be a human cost that is really traumatic. When you think about, I don't know the number, but a significant number of people are employed based on transportation. I don't know if that's a net positive for society.
Yeah, it's the number one employer of males, I believe, in America is drivers of some sort,
Sure.
whether it's UPS or FedEx or big rigs or whatever. So that's a really tough one, and I think part of the challenge is I don't think you can stop it,
Mm,
right? So that isn't the answer, but where do we innovate as business leaders who
sure.
care for humans, who know that unique value of every human life, and you talk about that, the dignity of life. Um, these are the questions that we all have
Sure.
to understand and wrestle with, I think. And
Yeah.
even from a very practical perspective, you made a good point. If all the truck drivers are unemployed and I sell cheeseburgers or whatever, like they're just buying less, right? It doesn't matter what I'm even selling. And so that's why I love the conversation, because these are things that we need to wrestle through, not necessarily having all the answers. Um, but yeah,
Yeah, well, I have a very dumb, unpopular answer that I'll share. So take it for what it's worth. But we could live in a society where a few people do in fact make billions, and then they share that with everyone else. And maybe not just in a strictly here's money, do whatever you want with it. But what if we funded artists much more, and we gave people opportunities to do creative things? We paid people to be teachers and explore information and to explore the universe and science. And there are so many things that we could pay people to do that we don't need taxi drivers. We don't need people to check us out at the grocery store. If that's not necessary, fine, get rid of them. But then find something that someone can do that makes our world better, and honor the fact that that's an important part of our world. We often pay teachers the least amount, but what if we really valued the things that matter in this world? And the billionaire says, hey, this is too much money for me. I'm going to make all this doing what is best for society. I'm making everyone's life at the checkout line better. But that doesn't mean I get to have the only one with money. Maybe I do that to fund so that other people can pursue other wonderful things. Never going to happen, but that sounds like a perfect society to me, where people are spending all their day writing beautiful piano concerts and paintings that have never been seen before. And um, sculpture, whatever it might be.
Yeah, I mean, that would be interesting. I'm curious. So my struggle that I've seen with that personally is I've run a handful of different businesses, and I've seen a difference between, let's say, you and I having intellectual conversation, philosophy, and these deep concepts, and people that are laborers and like that, and they enjoy that, and they like using their hands and like doing things. And I don't even necessarily mean in sort of a craftsman thing, but
Mhm.
I mean just think of I'm in the process of moving, the movers that move my house, or plumbers,
Mhm.
or whatever. Like these are honorable and good professions and necessary things that, by the way, if you're doing these types of things where like, you're like a plumber or carpenter, AI is less likely to replace you. By the way,
Exactly. Yeah.
I tell people that all cars are built by robots, but they're still all repaired by humans. There's a big difference there. Um,
Hmm.
but I don't see them then saying, okay, now I'm going to go write a play. Right now I'm going
No,
to
no,
go conduct it. Like there is a physical aspect to work that is
sure.
honorable and necessary. And even you mentioned earlier the monk thing, like I think the Benedictine, tradition
Hmm.
of the labor, and they weren't writing sonnets, they were laboring, they were, doing work. Um, I still think there's a large percentage of people that even if you gave them money and
Sure.
they didn't have something to do, they wouldn't know what to do and they wouldn't be productive with it.
Well, and yeah, and I don't mean only the intellectual pursuits or only the artistic pursuits, but hey, why can't we be a society that creates another wonder of the world? And we could create monuments that require a lot of building and they would require a lot of labor. AI could certainly help in that, but why not make every street we live on the cleanest, most beautiful street ever? You could employ people to really clean up the highways, to really plant grass and flowers everywhere. I mean, in some ways, it's kind of like the New Deal of the 30s. I mean, what if we invested in the infrastructure? And I don't just mean roads and highways, but every little detail. There are things that we could do if we decided we had the money for and we wanted to vote people to that. And it would give people a sense of honor. Look, I'm making my community better. I'm making not only my physical space, but my human space better. Again, this is crazy talk here. This is never going to
Yeah,
happen. But I
this is
think
way out there now,
moving
for
moving in
sure.
that direction of if we look in that futuristic society of as we imagined in the 60s where robots were doing all our things so we could focus on leisure. I think that's where we want to go. We just want to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to do it.
So let's get back to a little more practical with today. Everything's controlled by algorithms that we're encountering for the most part,
Hmm.
right? And so we talked about free will and how those things are being influenced and so on. How do we retain our freedom as individuals in a world they just know so much about us, right?
Yeah. Privacy is certainly going to become an issue in ways we don't even realize. And it already is an issue. I mean, I think how well my TikTok algorithm knows me.
Yeah,
It's scary. It gives me the video I want before I know I want it.
yeah,
And it reminds me how not unique I am because as I've seen on videos, there is no human experience that I have had that other people have not had. And so if you just pair those people up, there's a certain type of people, and that's a little frustrating at times.
hmm,
Um, I think one of the ways that we can claim this back is being really intentional about what we consume, not simply taking what is given to us, but really reflect on it. One person gave this idea that I will be employing when I go back from my hiatus from social media next year is take a moment in between everything you consume to think about what you just watched, what it involved, who it involved, and where it took place. Because I think we can live in this digital spheres too much where everything is everywhere and yet nowhere. And everything is just right there in front of us. And so we scroll and scroll and scroll and scroll, and we never really reflect on it. But if you take just that moment and even just add an element to this to pray for the people who are involved in this. I think you have more of a consciousness for your neighbor. You have a more reflection of who you are and what you're doing. And you might realize, oh, I didn't like that thing as much as I thought I did. Or in fact, I like this thing in a different way than I did. Or maybe this algorithm is a bit too much to me. Maybe I should log off and go outside and touch some grass. I mean, there's a lot of things that can come from this. But I think being more reflective and more intentional in what we choose rather than just saying, computer, show me what I'd like.
yeah. So one last question in that line, which I think is really useful, is all the algorithms are designed. If I go to YouTube and I watch something that is one political spectrum, the other, it's going to
Mm.
further me down that spectrum, right? It's
Yeah.
going to keep feeding me into whatever belief I already have. And this
Hmm.
is really scary for me
Yeah.
because Sam Altman, the CEO of of OpenAI has already said they're going to create AIs for every person with their own AI, right?
Mm.
And it's going to reflect back to your values. And so if the sort of social media AI is an echo chamber, oh my gosh, your own personal AI that knows everything about you is going to be the worst possible echo chamber ever. And that is just frightening to me. So I'm curious if you've heard of this or what your thoughts are on that. How do we prepare for it?
Sure, I think it is a problem, but the solution is what I just said, which is I think we need intentionality. I think we need to realize I don't want things that are just made for me. I don't want people who look just like me and sound just like me. That's not a good world. And if we recognize that, as I said before, we need to be more well-rounded, well, then that means I need to hear perspectives that are different from mine. I need to wrestle with ideas that challenge me. I need to even be angered in a right sort of way. Social media likes to anger you towards maybe more aggression or more towards polarization, but maybe anger to really question, why does that anger me? What is wrong with this situation? How do I go and try to fix it? If we do those sorts of things, hopefully we will say, all right, computer, you've given me this. Now let me go search for something different. Let me pick different points of view and make sure that's in my algorithm. I know people who very carefully curate their algorithm to do just that. They follow a host of people, some of which they don't even like, just so that they can get different perspectives. It takes a lot of energy to do that, and it takes swimming upstream, which is going to be difficult. And so the majority will not do that. But the more we can emphasize it in places like this, I think the better off we will be.
Yeah, one hack that I use for that is anytime I ask GPT or Gemini or the AIs for some viewpoint, I then ask, what's the best evidence against it?
Oh, yeah.
And so it doesn't matter what it is. It could be health advice. It could be anything. And you just ask for the opposite. And it's pretty good about, balancing out and say, oh, I didn't consider that. Or why might this be
Yep.
wrong? You just phrase it that way and then it'll feed back. So there's a benefit of AI that it actually can instantly give you the opposite perspective.
And I think it's a great question for life, and something I try to tell our middle schoolers in particular as they're forming their worldview and as they're asking these deep questions, to look to science. The best science doesn't try to prove itself right, it tries to prove itself wrong. You come up with a hypothesis and then you look for every way in which you are wrong. And only when you've exhausted all those ways can you say that you might be right. Politically, socially, even religiously, that's not the way we approach things. We look for confirmation bias, we look for the opinion that makes us feel the best. And I don't think that's good for us. So asking AI, hey, prove me wrong, tell me the evidence against this, is a great tactic.
Awesome. I so much appreciate the time and your insights and dealing with my softball questions, putting you
Yeah,
on the
you
spot
had
with
me
some
going
of
there.
those.
I don't know if I was helpful in any way, but I'm glad to be here.
Well, the things we all got to figure out. I don't know that anybody has the perfect answer yet, but together, we can work and keep discussing it and hopefully get to some better solutions. What's the best way for somebody to follow you, connect with you, stay in touch?
Yeah, so you can go to breakinginthehabit.org, which is my website. They'll have a recap of all my social media of the week. You'll have ways to connect with all the things I do on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, TikTok, all those things.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Father Casey. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you.